Australia, the land of red dirt, endless highways and tradies who'd rather wrestle a croc than drive a dud ute. Here a ute isn't just a vehicle, it's a way of life. It's your office, your toolbox, your ticket to the weekend. It's supposed to tow your boat, haul your bricks, and survive a roost strike at 110 kilometers per hour without spitting its guts out. So how, in the name of all that's holy, did we end up with utes that couldn't pull a skin off a custard? Welcome to the crime scene of Australia's worst work utes, a lineup so shoddy they make a flat tyre look like a personality trait. This isn't just a list of lemons, it's a full-blown investigation into the utes that betrayed the Aussie dream of hard yakka and open roads. Before we name and shame, let's set the bar for what makes a ute a proper Aussie workhorse, and why these offenders fell so spectacularly short. A good ute is like a good mate, reliable, tough, and doesn't whinge when you ask it to carry a load. Here's what separates the legends from the landfill: towing capacity. A ute that can't tow at least 3,000 kilograms is about as useful as a Bunnings sausage sizzle with no snags. You need to haul a trailer, a boat, or a caravan without the engine sounding like it's auditioning for a death metal band. Payload. Tradies need room for tools, cement mixers, and enough gyprock to build a McMansion. Anything less than 900 kilogram payload is a glorified hatchback. Ground clearance. Australia's roads range from Sydney's pothole-ridden nightmares to outback tracks that eat lowriders for breakfast. Less than 200mm clearance. Good luck not scraping your sump on a speed bump. Suspension. Leaf springs are king for heavy loads, but they need to be tuned right. A ute that bounces like a kangaroo on a trampoline or sags like a tired mattress is a deal breaker. Reliability. Overheating in 40 degrees Celsius heat, dodgy electronics, or parts rarer than a dingo's dental plan. That's a one-way ticket to the scrap heap. Dealer support. If you're waiting 6 months for a replacement alternator, you might as well send a carrier pigeon to China. Resale value. A ute should hold its value like a Holden Commodore in the 90s, not plummet faster than your uncle's crypto portfolio. The utes on this list failed these tests so badly they're practically case studies in how not to build a work vehicle. Let's meet the culprits. LDVT60, pre-2021, the looks the part, falls apart. Price, $28,990 to $38,990. Towing, 3,000 kilograms. Braked. Payload, approximately 750 to 900 kilograms. Ground clearance, 215 millimeters. The crime, promising the world, delivering a migraine. The LDVT60 rolled into Australia in 2017 with a swagger, boasting a 5-star ANCAP rating and a price tag that undercut the big boys by $20,000. It looked like a Ford Ranger's long-lost cousin with a beefy grille and a 2.8-litre turbo diesel that promised 110 kilowatts, 360 newton meters. But looks are where the good times ended. Owners reported rust appearing faster than mould in a Darwin wet season, belt tensioners snapping like twigs, and electrical gremlins that turned the dashboard into a Christmas light show. One ex-post summed it up. Bought a T60, now I'm on a first-name basis with my mechanic. The T60's payload was decent, but the tray was narrower than a politician's conscience, making it useless for bulky loads. Towing 3,000 kilograms was possible, but the engine wheezed like a chain smoker running a marathon. And parts? You'd wait longer for a clutch than for a Centrelink payment. Fine for city runs if you don't mind weekly breakdowns. Try taking it to Birdsville and you'll be hitchhiking by lunchtime. Great Wall Steed / V240, more wall than great. Price, $22,900 to $32,900. Towing, 2,000 to 2,500 kilograms. Braked. Payload, approximately 800 kilograms. Ground clearance, 194 millimeters. The crime, cheap as chips, but you get what you pay for. The Great Wall Steed, and its V240 predecessor, was China's first stab at cracking the Aussie ute market. It was dirt cheap, with a price that made a used Hilux look like a Rolls-Royce. But this ute was a masterclass in cutting corners. The 2.4-litre petrol engine, 100 kilowatts, 200 newton meters, couldn't tow a wheelie bin without breaking a sweat. Owners on Reddit's R4x4 Australia called it a ute-shaped paperweight, with interior plastics that cracked faster than a bad joke and a suspension that sagged under a single pallet of bricks. The Steed's tray was too small for serious loads, and the 194mm ground clearance meant it bottomed out on anything rougher than a suburban speed bump. Overheating was a regular feature in summer, and parts were as rare as a quiet day at the races. Good for posing at the local servo, but useless for anything resembling work. Resale value, you get more selling empty VB cans. Mahindra Pickup, more like give up. Price, $26,990 to $37,990. Towing, 2,500 kilograms, braked. Payload, approximately 1,000 kilograms. Ground clearance, 210 millimeters. The crime, a Ute so forgettable, even Mahindra gave up on it. The Mahindra Pickup tried to muscle in on the budget Ute scene with a rugged look and a 2.2-litre diesel, 103 kilowatts, 320 newton meters. It sounded promising, decent payload, a 5-year warranty, and Indian-built toughness. But reality hit like a sledgehammer. The interior was straight out of the 90s, with plastic so cheap they made a Great Wall look like a Bentley. Owners reported turbo lag that felt like waiting for dial-up internet, and the gearbox was clunkier than a drunk tradie at knockoff. One owner on Gumtree described it as a tractor with a tray, and not in a good way. The pickup could handle a decent load, but towing anything over 2,000 kilograms turned it into a slug. Suspension was so stiff it rattled your fillings loose, and dealer support was patchier than a rural mobile signal. Maybe for a farm where breakdowns are part of the charm, but for serious work, you're better off with a wheelbarrow. Sangyong Muso, 2018 to 2020, pasta by name, disaster by nature. Price, $30,990 to $41,990. Towing, 3,000 kilograms, braked. Payload, approximately 790 to 850 kilograms. Ground clearance, 215 millimeters. The crime, a Ute that tried to be premium but ended up a punchline. The Sangyong Muso arrived with a fancy name and a 2.2-litre diesel, 133 kilowatts, 400 newton meters, that promised to take on the Hilux. It had a coil spring rear suspension for a smoother ride, but that's where the good news stopped. The interior felt like a budget caravan with buttons that fell off faster than a drunk at a Bucks night. Owners reported electrical issues from dodgy sensors to infotainment screens that froze like a Windows XP laptop. And parts? Good luck. Sangyong's Australian presence was shakier than a dodgy scaffolding job. The Muso's payload was underwhelming, and the tray was too narrow for standard pallets. Towing was okay, but the engine overheated on long hauls and the suspension sagged under heavy loads. One Reddit user quipped, "It's called Muso because it's saucy, but not in a good way." Fine for light duties in the city, but take it off-road, and it'll cry faster than a city kid at a shearing shed. Holden Colorado, 2008 to 2012. The Zuzu that left us boo-hoo. Price, $35,990 to $49,990. Towing, 3,000 kilograms, braked. Payload, approximately 1,000 kilograms. Ground clearance, 210 millimeters. The crime, a Ute that promised Holden toughness but delivered headaches. The first-gen Holden Colorado was supposed to be a rugged alternative to the Hilux, built on the same platform as the Isuzu D-Max. But while the D-Max was a workhorse, the Colorado was more like a show pony with a limp. The 2.4-litre diesel, 98 kilowatts, 225 newton meters, was gutless, and even the 3.0-litre, 120 kilowatts, 360 newton meters, struggled to tow anything heavy. Owners reported constant turbo failures, overheating in summer, and a suspension that felt like it was designed by someone who'd never seen a dirt road. One ex-post called it a Ute that breaks down so often it's basically a mechanic's pension plan. The Colorado's tray was decent, but the suspension collapsed under heavy loads, and the ground clearance was useless for anything rougher than a gravel driveway. Parts were available, but dealer service was slower than a wet week in Brisbane. Okay for urban tradies who don't push it, but for outback work, it's about as useful as a paper towel in a monsoon. Tata Xenon, India's gift to breakdown recovery services. Price, $27,990 to $39,990. Towing, 2,500 kilograms, braked. Payload, approximately 900 kilograms. Ground clearance, 200 millimeters. The crime, a Ute so bad it vanished without a trace. The Tata Xenon was India's attempt to join the Ute party with a 2.2-litre diesel, 110 kilowatts, 320 newton meters, and a price that screamed bargain. But this ute was a masterclass in disappointment. The interior was flimsier than a $2 shop toolset, and the engine had less grunt than a lawnmower. Owners reported everything from gearbox failures to electrical systems that shorted out in the rain. One Reddit user summed it up. Bought a Xenon. Now I'm on a first-name basis with my tow truck driver. The Xenon's towing was woeful, with the engine overheating on anything over 2,000 kilograms. The suspension was so soft it bottomed out with a few bags of cement, and parts were rarer than a sober Saturday night. Unless your job is professional regret, steer clear. This ute was so bad, Tata pulled it from Australia faster than you can say warranty claim. Volkswagen Amarok Auto TDI 340, 2011 to 2016. More showroom than worksite. Price, $39,990 to $49,990. Towing, 3,000 kilograms. Braked. Payload, approximately 1,000 kilograms. Ground clearance, 192 millimeters. The crime, a ute that forgot it was supposed to work. The VW Amarok TDI 342 wheel drive was marketed as a premium ute with a 2.0-litre bi-turbo diesel, 120 kilowatts, 400 newton meters, and a comfy cabin. But for a work ute, it was about as useful as a barista at a building site. The two-wheel drive setup meant it got bogged faster than a backpacker in a rental Corolla, and the low ground clearance, 192 millimeters, made it useless off-road. Owners reported transmission issues with the auto gearbox, hunting gears like a lost tourist, and VW's customer service was so bad it made Telstra look like a charity. The Amarok's tray was decent, but the payload was limited by a soft suspension that sagged under heavy loads. Towing was okay, but the engine overheated on long hauls, and parts took longer to arrive than a Sydney train in peak hour. Great for posing at the local cafe, but for actual work, you'd be better off with a bicycle and a trailer. Ford Courier, 1999 to 2006. Couldn't tow a wheelie bin. Price, $25,990 to $35,990. Towing, 1,800 to 2,500 kilograms, braked. Payload, approximately 700 to 900 kilograms. Ground clearance, 185 millimeters. The crime, a ute that was more courier van than workhorse. The last-gen Ford Courier was a relic of the early 2000s, sharing DNA with the Mazda Bravo. The 2.5-litre diesel, 86 kilowatts, 280 newton meters, was so underpowered it struggled to tow a small trailer without gasping for air. The auto transmission was clunkier than a bad karaoke performance, and the suspension was so soft it bottomed out with a couple of toolboxes. Owners reported constant overheating, dodgy electrics, and a tray so small it could barely fit a weekend's worth of Bunnings gear. The Courier's towing capacity was a joke, and the low ground clearance meant it scraped on anything rougher than a suburban street. Parts were cheap, but the ute spent more time in the shop than on the job. Fine for delivering pizzas, but for tradies? It's about as useful as a paperweight in a cyclone. Nissan Navara D40, 2005 to 2014, the bending chassis bandit. Price, $29,990 to $49,990. Towing, 3,000 kilograms, braked. Payload, approximately 900 to 1,000 kilograms. Ground clearance, 230 millimeters. The crime, a ute so bendy it needed a yoga instructor. The Nissan Navara D40 was a legend in its own lunchbox, with a 2.5-litre diesel, 128 kilowatts, 403 newton meters, and a tough guy look. But its Achilles heel was a chassis that could snap under heavy loads, earning it the nickname Banana Navara on forums like Reddit's R4x4 Australia. Owners reported cracked frames, especially when towing or carrying max payload, and the electrics were flakier than a bad pie crust. One ex-post joked, "My D40's chassis bent so bad, it's now a boomerang." The D40's towing was decent on paper, but the chassis issues made it a gamble. The suspension was okay for light loads, but sagged under pressure, and parts availability was hit and miss outside major cities. Fine for light duties, but for serious work? You're rolling the dice on a breakdown or a bent frame. Jeep Gladiator, 2019 to 2022, $90,000 for a tantrum-throwing toy. Price, $76,990 to $89,990. Towing, 2,721 kilograms. Braked. Payload, approximately 700 to 800 kilograms. Ground clearance, 249 millimeters. The crime, a lifestyle ute that forgot how to work. The Jeep Gladiator was marketed as the ultimate off-road ute, with Wrangler DNA and a 3.6-litre V6 petrol, 209 kilowatts, 347 newton meters, or 3.0-litre diesel, 194 kilowatts, 600 newton meters. But for $90,000, you got a payload smaller than a hatchback, a towing capacity that lagged behind a Hilux, and a suspension that bucked like a Bronco under load. Owners reported electrical gremlins, from infotainment crashes to sensors that went AWOL, and dealer service was slower than a wet week in Wollongong. One Reddit user said, "My Gladiator's great for Instagram, but useless for actual work. The Gladiator's tray was too small for serious loads, and the towing capacity was pathetic for the price. Off-road, it was capable, but the soft suspension and low payload made it a joke for tradies. Perfect for weekend warriors who want to flex at the beach but for real work. It's about as practical as a Ferrari on a farm. Ute or useless? Quickfire Rose. LDV T60. Looks like a Ranger, works like a lawnmower. Great Wall Steed. So cheap, even the rust comes free. Mahindra Pickup. The only thing it picks up is complaints. Sangyong Muso. Sounds like a pasta. Drives like a drama. Holden Colorado. Proof that not all Holdens are heroes. Tata Xenon. Broke down so often it's got its own tow truck. VW Amarok TD I342 WD. A ute for people who hate utes. Ford Courier. Delivers disappointment, not payloads. Nissan Navara D40. The only ute that does yoga without asking. Jeep Gladiator. $90,000 for a ute that throws tantrums. Cultural catastrophes. Marketing mishaps and Aussie disasters. The marketing for these utes was like a bad Tinder profile. Big promises, zero delivery. Take the Great Wall Steed's ads with slow-mo shots of it climbing mountains. Mate, it couldn't climb a curb without overheating. Or the LDV T60's tough as nails campaign. Nails must be pretty soft in China. The Jeep Gladiator's off-road legend tagline was laughable when it struggled with a full tray, and the Mahindra Pickup's built for the tough stuff slogan was clearly written by someone who'd never seen an Australian pothole. Compare these to Aussie classics like the Holden one-tonner, a ute so tough it could probably survive a nuclear war, or the Toyota Hilux, which has been hauling tradies' dreams since the 80s. These duds couldn't even survive a trip to Bunnings without throwing a tantrum. The Navara D40's chassis issue was so infamous, it sparked a class action in Australia, with owners fuming over Nissan's "it's your fault" response. And the Tata Xenon? It disappeared so fast it's like it never existed, probably for the best. Have any of these utes clawed their way out of the scrap heap? Let's take a look. LDV T60, post-2021 models, got a 2.0-litre bi-turbo diesel, 160 kilowatts, 500 newton meters, and Walkinshaw tuned suspension, making them semi-respectable. The 2025 T60 Max Plus even boasts a 3,500 kilogram towing capacity and a 7-year warranty. Still, rust and parts issues linger, so proceed with caution. Great Wall Steed, replaced by the GWM Cannon, which is a massive step up with a 3,000 kilogram towing capacity and better build quality. The Steed is best left in the history books. Mahindra Pickup. Mahindra quietly exited the Australian ute market and no one noticed. No redemption here. It's a relic. Sangyong Muso. Later models, 2021 Plus, improved with a beefier engine and better tech. But the brand's shaky presence in Australia makes it a gamble. Holden Colorado, the second-gen Colorado, 2012 to 2020, was a big improvement, sharing DNA with the solid Isuzu D-Max. The first gen is still a hard pass. Tata Xenon. No redemption. Tata's ute experiment failed and they've stuck to making buses since. VW Amarok TDI 342 wheel drive. The 4-wheel drive Amarok models are much better, especially the 2023 Plus versions based on the Ford Ranger. The 2WD TDI 340 is a forgotten footnote. Ford Courier, replaced by the Ranger, which is now Australia's top-selling vehicle. The Courier is a distant memory, and that's fine. Nissan Navara D40. Later Navara's D23 fixed the chassis issues, but the D40's reputation is still radioactive. Avoid like a dodgy kebab. Jeep Gladiator. Recent updates added a diesel option and better tech, but the payload and towing limits are still laughable for the price. It's a lifestyle toy, not a workhorse. These aren't just bad utes. They're a betrayal of every tradie who's grafted through a 12-hour shift. only to find their rig can't haul a pallet of gyprock without throwing a hissy fit. They're the broken promises of glossy brochures, the shattered dreams of blokes who just wanted a ute that could do the job. From the LDV T60's rusting shell to the Navara D40's yoga bent chassis, these utes didn't just fail. They insulted the spirit of the Australian workhorse, but there's hope. The market's moved on with utes like the Ford Ranger, Toyota Hilux, and Isuzu D-Max, proving that you can have power, reliability, and a tray that doesn't buckle under a load. So let these lemons rest in peace, rusting away in second-hand lots or forgotten on rural properties. For every tradie, farmer, and weekend warrior, there's a better ute out there, one that won't leave you stranded on a dirt track, cursing the day you signed the finance papers. Audience challenge. Got a ute horror story? Drop it in the comments. Bonus points if it involves fire, tears, or a tray liner that gave up before you did. And if you're still driving one of these duds, tell us why. We won't judge much.